It was just another quiet Saturday night at the Woodland Villa Apartments in Westland, Michigan. The kind of place where neighbors expect calm, students coming home from class, families preparing dinner, friends gathering for the weekend. Nothing about this night seemed unusual until it was. Inside one of those apartments lived a young woman full of promise. 20-year-old Sarah Carroll, a college student with dreams of becoming a physician assistant, was looking ahead to a bright future. She had her whole life waiting just beyond the horizon, careers, adventures, and laughter yet to be shared. But on this night, the ordinary became devastatingly extraordinary. A knock at the door, a confrontation, and within minutes, that future was stolen. It was an act of violence that no one saw coming. And yet in hindsight, the signs were there all along. The man behind this tragedy wasn't a stranger. He wasn't an unknown threat lurking in the shadows. He was someone Sarah once trusted, someone she had already walked away from, an ex-boyfriend who refused to let go, and whose obsession had been growing darker by the day. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, neighbors began to hear noises, raised voices, then something far worse. By the time police arrived, the scene was already heartbreaking. Sarah Carroll was gone, her ex-boyfriend dead by his own hand. In the space of one night, 2 lives ended, and countless others were chained forever. But this wasn't just another crime scene. This was a story about a young woman who had been stalked for weeks, who had tried to take steps to protect herself, but whose cries for help came too late. Her story is one that resonates far beyond the walls of that apartment complex. What happened to Sarah is not an isolated tragedy. It's a devastating reflection of a larger epidemic, domestic violence and stalking, that hides in plain sight. So often it begins quietly. So often it ends just like this, with heartbreak, loss, and unanswered questions. Tonight, we step into Sarah Carroll's story, not just to recount the details of what happened, but to honor her memory, to understand the warning signs, and to confront the difficult truth about how love can turn into control and control into violence. This is the story of Sarah Carroll, a story that should never have had to be told. Before we continue, if this story resonated with you and you want to ensure you never miss a deep dive into stories that matter, we ask for your support. Please consider hitting that subscribe button so you can come back and revisit this and other critical stories that need to be remembered. The more people who know about this case, the more awareness we can create about the dangers of domestic violence and unchecked social media rage. If you believe this story can help others, please like and share this video with your friends and family. Your simple click could be the awareness someone needs. The true value of a story like this lies in the conversations it inspires. We invite you to share your thoughts and feelings in the comments section below. What did you take away from this case? Have you seen similar situations unfold? Your comments can become a valuable space for others to learn from your thoughts and experiences, turning a single tragedy into a powerful lesson for our community. Sarah Carroll wasn't just another name in the news. She was someone's daughter, someone's best friend, someone's dreamer. Born and raised in Michigan, she carried with her the kind of light that made people gravitate toward her. Her friends say she was the type of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with new friends by the end of the night. She had a smile that could calm worries, and a sense of humor that made even the dullest days brighter. From an early age, Sarah had big plans. She wasn't content with simply going through the motions of life. She had chosen a path in medicine, studying at Schoolcraft College, determined to become a physician assistant. Her passion wasn't about prestige or wealth. It was about helping people, making a difference in the lives of others. She wanted to heal, to care, and to be that voice of comfort when others were at their most vulnerable. Family and friends described her as the life of the party, but not in a loud or reckless sense. Sarah carried joy within her, and she shared it effortlessly. Whether it was cracking a joke to ease a tense moment or offering her shoulder to a friend in pain, she seemed to know exactly what people needed. Her kindness was natural, not forced, and it was one of the many reasons she was so loved. Sarah's loved ones remember how determined she was. She wasn't afraid of hard work, whether it was late nights of studying or juggling school with part-time jobs. She believed that her effort would someday pay off in a career she was passionate about. That determination made her stand out, not just as a student, but as a young woman who had found her purpose early in life. But behind her ambition and drive was also a playful spirit. She loved to laugh, to create memories, and to remind people that even in the middle of life's struggles, there was room for joy. Friends said she had a way of lifting people up when they were down, often without even realizing how much of an impact she had. To them, Sarah wasn't just a friend. She was family. Her parents saw her as a bright light with limitless potential. She wasn't just their daughter. She was their pride. They often spoke about how proud they were of her drive, her compassion, and her ability to chase her dreams with such focus. Her future was something they looked forward to, something they celebrated with every milestone she reached. Tragically, that future was cut short before it truly began. But what Sarah left behind was more than memories. It was a legacy of love, resilience, and hope. Her story, though painfully brief, continues to inspire those who knew her to live with the same joy and determination she carried every day. To know Sarah Carroll was to know a soul that was rare and beautiful. She wasn't perfect, but she was genuine. And in a world where authenticity is hard to find, Sarah stood out as someone who reminded us all the power of kindness, the importance of dreams, and the joy of simply living with love in your heart. In the weeks before her death, Sarah's life looked on the surface like that of any other college student. Classes, friends, and a future she was working hard to build. But underneath that normalcy was a growing sense of fear. Behind closed doors, she was being watched, followed, and harassed by someone she once cared for. It wasn't random. It wasn't chance. It was her ex-boyfriend, and his fixation on her was intensifying. The relationship between Sarah and her ex had ended, but for him, it wasn't over. Instead of moving on, he turned to control, showing up in places uninvited, monitoring her, and refusing to accept her independence. What might have seemed like persistence to an outsider was, in reality, stalking, a dangerous behavior that escalates far too often into violence. For nearly 2 months, Sarah endured this unwanted presence in her life. It was the kind of fear that chips away at your freedom. Every trip outside felt uncertain. Every phone notification carried the weight of potential danger. She knew something was wrong, and she took steps to protect herself.
Learning the tragic details behind a shooting in Westland on Saturday night. And family members of the young woman who died say they know who's responsible for her death. Good Sunday evening. I'm Jay Scott Smith, and the big story at 11 o'clock is in Westland, where the parents of a 20-year-old woman who was killed in an apartment complex last night are telling Local 4 it was a murder-suicide. The shooting happened at the Woodland Villa Apartments near Warren Road and Central City Parkway. Let's go live to Noelle Friel. And Noelle, they believe they know who took her life.
Yeah, Jay, Westland police still haven't released any details about what led up to this shooting, but family of the victim have identified her as 20-year-old Sarah Carroll. Her parents say she was killed at this apartment complex by her ex-boyfriend, who they say had been stalking her for weeks.
It feels good to know she was so lost.
Is it peaceful? Is it free like they say?
The parents of 20-year-old Sarah Carroll now shattered after her loss. Friends and family came together Sunday evening to remember her and comfort each other.
I'm glad I have all the support, but it's so hard. It's really hard.
Jennifer Carroll tells Local 4 her daughter's ex-boyfriend shot and killed her Saturday night at her apartment complex on Drew Circle Drive and then ended his own life. She says he had been stalking Sarah for the past 2 months, and Sarah had been trying to obtain a personal protection order. She had confided in friends, but Jennifer says she had no idea her daughter was living in fear.
Other parents watch your kids, try to get more into their life, try to get them to be open and talk to you.
Her parents say Sarah lit up a room and had career goals she was ready to achieve. They say she was studying to become a physician assistant. Her loved ones now mourning a life cut far too short.
She was funny and she was smart. She had everything going for her.
She was loved by everybody she met. Just wonderful. I'm going to miss my baby.
And Westland police plan to give an update on this case on Monday or Tuesday. A GoFundMe has been started to help Sarah's family pay for funeral expenses. We have that link in this story at clickondetroit.com. Reporting live, Noelle Friel, Local 4.
Sarah was in the process of filing for a protection order, a desperate measure that shows just how seriously she took the threat against her. A young woman should never have to think about legal documents just to feel safe from someone she once trusted. But this was the reality Sarah found herself in, hoping the law could create a barrier between her and the man who wouldn't let her go. Tragically, she kept much of this hidden from her family. Her parents later revealed they had no idea the stalking had gotten so severe. Sarah, like many victims, may have felt ashamed or afraid of worrying them, or simply hopeful that the nightmare would eventually stop. It's a silence shared by so many victims of domestic violence, a silence that can prove deadly. Meanwhile, her ex's behavior was spiraling. Reports suggest that his mental health was deteriorating, and his obsession with Sarah consumed him. Instead of seeking help, he sank deeper into anger and control. That obsession turned into a plan, and Sarah became the target of his rage. This wasn't just a private struggle. It was a warning unheeded, a situation that had all the red flags of danger. Friends, neighbors, and even Sarah herself could sense the tension building. But like so many cases of stalking and intimate partner violence, the escalation outpaced the system's ability to intervene in time. By the night of August 30th, the threats Sarah had feared for weeks materialized into reality. What began as stalking had escalated into confrontation. The warnings had been there. The fear was real. And the system that was supposed to protect her was just one step too late. The night of August 30th began like so many others in Westland, Michigan. The air was calm, the apartment complex quiet. Neighbors were settling in for the evening, never imagining that within hours, tragedy would unfold just steps from their front doors. To them, it was just another Saturday night. To Sarah Carroll, it was the night her life would be taken away. Sarah had gone to the Woodland Villa Apartments, a place meant to be ordinary and safe. But her ex-boyfriend was there too. What happened inside those walls was a moment of confrontation that spiraled into something irreversible. She had ended the relationship weeks before, but in his mind, it was not finished. That night, his obsession reached its most violent point. Neighbors later reported hearing raised voices. What was said in those final moments may never be fully known, but it was clear that tension filled the air. The man she once trusted pulled out a shotgun, a weapon of power, of finality. In seconds, he turned an argument into a fatal act of violence. Sarah never stood a chance. After pulling the trigger, he didn't flee. Instead, he did something chilling. He called 911 himself. The voice on the other end of the line would hear a man confess to a crime he had just committed, a call that doubled as both confession and a farewell. Then, before police could arrive, he turned the gun on himself. When officers entered the apartment, the scene they found was devastating. Sarah's life had been cut short at just 20 years old. The man who had stalked and terrorized her was also gone, leaving no opportunity for justice, no chance for answers. 2 young lives extinguished in a matter of minutes, leaving behind a silence that echoed to the complex. For neighbors, the flashing lights of patrol cars and ambulances painted a surreal picture. What they had heard moments earlier now became heartbreakingly clear. Sarah's death wasn't just another statistic. It was a life violently ripped away, and it happened right there in their community. For her family, the news was almost unbearable. They hadn't known the full extent of the danger Sarah was in. Now, they were faced with the reality that their daughter's future, the dream she worked for, the life she deserved, was gone. What remained was grief, unanswered questions, and the heavy weight of preventable tragedy. The fatal night of August 30th was more than a single violent act. It was a devastating conclusion to weeks of stalking, fear, and missed opportunities to protect a young woman who deserved so much more. In just a few minutes, Sarah's story changed from one of promise to one of loss. And her community, her family, and her friends would never be the same again. The shock of Sarah Carroll's death rippled quickly through Westland and beyond. What had begun as a quiet Saturday night became the lead story in news reports, a tragedy too heavy for her community to comprehend. For neighbors, classmates, and family, the question was the same. How could a young woman so full of life be taken so suddenly and in such a violent way? In the days that followed, grief took many forms. At Schoolcraft College, Sarah's classmates struggled with the loss of someone they saw not only as a peer, but as a friend. Professors and mentors who once guided her studies were left with empty seats and unanswered potential. It was a silence that lingered in the hallways, a reminder of the fragility of the future Sarah had been building. Her family, in their heartbreak, began the painful process of planning a funeral no parent should ever have to imagine. The Carrolls were left to balance unbearable sorrow with practical realities, costs, arrangements, and the weight of saying goodbye to their daughter. To help ease this burden, friends and community members set up a GoFundMe page, and donations poured in. Each dollar came with words of comfort, each message a reflection of how deeply Sarah's story resonated. The community came together in other ways, too. A balloon release was held in Sarah's honor, a symbolic gesture of love and remembrance. Friends gathered, clutching bright balloons that floated skyward, a vivid contrast against the grief in their hearts. In those moments, Sarah's spirit seemed to soar with them, carried by the love of the people who refused to let her memory fade. But grief was not the only emotion present. There was anger, too. Many asked how a young woman who was actively trying to protect herself through legal means could still fall victim to stalking and violence. Questions about how the system handles threats like the one Sarah faced became part of the public conversation. Could more have been done? Could Sarah have been saved if the warnings had been acted on sooner? For Sarah's parents, the aftermath was not just about mourning, but also about speaking out. In interviews, they encouraged families to be more involved, urging parents to check in on their children and to recognize the signs of danger. Their words carried both pain and urgency, as they hoped to prevent another family from experiencing the same devastating loss. The response reached beyond Westland, across Michigan, and even across the country. Sarah's story became a reminder of the dangers of stalking and domestic violence. Advocates used her tragedy to highlight the importance of stronger protections for victims, better access to mental health resources, and more conversations about warning signs that should never be ignored. And yet, at the center of it all remained Sarah, a young woman remembered not for the way her life ended, but for the way she lived. Her laughter, her ambition, her kindness. Those were the things her family and friends held on to. In the midst of their grief, they clung to the idea that Sarah's story, though marked by tragedy, could serve as a light for others, a call to action, so that no one else would have to endure the same fate. Sarah's parents never imagined their daughter's name would become attached to a tragedy. For them, she was still the smiling little girl they raised, the ambitious student they encouraged, and the bright young woman whose future they couldn't wait to see unfold. Now, in the wake of her death, they found themselves in a position no parent should ever be in, speaking about her child's life as a cautionary tale. Her mother's words cut to the heart of the matter. Through tears, she urged other parents to do what she wishes she had done more of, get closer, ask deeper questions, and pay attention to even the smallest changes. Try to get more into their life, she said, her voice heavy with regret and love. Be open and talk to you. Her plea was not one of blame, but a warning, a message to other families to never assume silence means safety. Her father, equally grief-stricken, turned his focus toward the other side of the story, the man who killed their daughter. He acknowledged that the young man had been struggling with his mental health, and in that struggle, his obsession grew uncontrollable. Get them the help they need, he urged, emphasizing that ignoring the warning signs of emotional and psychological decline can have devastating consequences, not just for the individual, but for everyone around them. Together, Sarah's parents spoke not only as grieving mother and father, but as advocates. They wanted to transform their pain into a message that might save someone else's child. Their voices carried the weight of loss, but also the strength of love, a love that didn't end with Sarah's life, but continued in their determination to honor her by helping others. The family's message was simple yet powerful. Communication matters. Silence can be deadly. Sarah's parents admitted they didn't know how bad the stalking had become because Sarah hadn't shared it with them. Whether from fear of worrying them or hope that the situation would resolve, she kept much of it to herself. Her parent heartbreak became a call for all families to foster openness, where children feel safe enough to confide their struggles without hesitation. At vigils and in interviews, the Carrolls repeated their plea. Look for the signs, don't ignore them, and act early. They highlighted that what happened to Sarah didn't happen in isolation. It was a result of behaviors that escalated over time, behaviors that could have been intercepted if the right conversations and interventions had taken place. Their courage in speaking out so soon after their loss struck many as remarkable. In the rawness of grief, most families would retreat inward, but the Carrolls chose to face the cameras, the microphones, and the questions. They did it not for themselves, but for the countless other families who might one day face similar threats. If sharing Sarah's story could protect even one life, they believed it was worth their pain. The community listened. Advocates against domestic violence and stalking amplified the Carrolls' words, tying Sarah's tragedy to a broader pattern that continues to plague young women across the country. Their message became more than a personal testimony. It became part of a movement to strengthen protections, spread awareness, and dismantle the silence that often allows abuse to escalate unchecked. And through it all, the Carrolls never stopped reminding people of who Sarah was. They didn't want her remembered only as a victim, but as a daughter who was loved, a student with ambition, and a young woman whose light still shines in the memories of those who knew her. Their message was not just about prevention, but about legacy, ensuring Sarah's life continues to make an impact, even in her absence. In the end, their awareness campaign was rooted in both grief and hope. Grief for the life stolen too soon, but hope that Sarah's story could change the lives of others. For her parents, speaking out became a way to keep her alive, not physically, but through the lessons her story carried. And in their voices, one could hear both heartbreak and resilience, a combination that gave their message the power to truly resonate. The murder of Sarah Carroll was not an isolated act of violence. It was part of a pattern seen far too often across the country, where relationships that should bring safety and comfort instead turn into sources of fear and danger. Behind Sarah's story is a larger truth. Stalking and intimate partner violence remain some of the most underreported and underestimated threats in society today. Statistics reveal that millions of women and men in the United States experience stalking each year, and in far too many cases, that stalking escalates the violence. Sarah's experience fits into a chilling pattern. When victims attempt to break free, the risk often increases. The very moment of reclaiming independence can become the most dangerous time, and tragically, Sarah's story underscores this reality. The broader context also shows gaps in protection. Victims often try to seek restraining or protection orders, but those legal tools take time, and paperwork cannot physically shield someone from harm. For Sarah, she had begun the process of protecting herself through the legal system, but time ran out. Her story demonstrates how critical it is to not only strengthen laws, but also provide faster and more effective interventions for those in immediate danger. Beyond legal systems, mental health plays an undeniable role. Sarah's parents emphasized this in their statements, pointing out that her ex-boyfriend was struggling with mental health issues that went untreated. Left unaddressed, his obsession turned destructive. This raises an urgent question. How many tragedies could be prevented if communities were better equipped to recognize and respond to mental health crises before they reached a breaking point? The call to action is not just for lawmakers or police. It is for all of us. Friends, family, neighbors, and classmates can be the first line of defense. Sarah's silence about the full extent of the stalking is not unusual. Many victims downplay their fears out of embarrassment or hope that things will improve. That is why awareness matters. Knowing the red flags, unwanted attention, threats, repeated surveillance, can mean the difference between prevention and tragedy. Communities also need to foster open dialogue about stalking and domestic violence. Too often, victims are left feeling alone, ashamed, or dismissed. Creating safe spaces in schools, workplaces, and neighborhoods where people can talk openly about these issues is essential. Sarah's story should remind us that silence allows danger to grow, while awareness can save lives. There are resources available, but they must be more visible. Hotlines, shelters, advocacy groups, and crisis counselors exist to provide immediate help. Sharing these resources widely and normalizing the act of reaching out can empower victims who might otherwise feel trapped. When people know they are not alone, they are more likely to seek the support they desperately need. On a societal level, Sarah's tragedy is a call for greater accountability. It asks us to rethink how seriously stalking and controlling behaviors are taken before they escalate to violence. It challenges us to support stronger laws, better training for law enforcement, and expanded mental health services. It is not enough to mourn Sarah. We must also learn from her story. But perhaps the most powerful call to action comes from her family's own words. Their plea was simple. Talk to your children, listen without judgment, and act quickly if something feels wrong. In their pain, they have offered a gift of wisdom, a reminder that prevention begins in the home, with conversations that create trust and safety. Sarah's story, though devastating, can become a spark for change. If her name becomes attached not only to tragedy but also to awareness, reform, and prevention, then her legacy will extend far beyond her 20 short years. The responsibility is ours to carry, to honor her memory not just in grief, but in action, ensuring fewer families ever have to stand where her parents now stand. When a life is cut short, it is easy for the headlines to focus on the tragedy, the crime, and the violence. But Sarah Carroll deserves more than that. She deserves to be remembered not just for how she died, but for how she lived. The closing chapter of her story is not about loss. It's about honoring the light she brought to the world. Sarah was only 20 years old, yet she had already touched countless lives. Friends recall her laughter, her warmth, and her uncanny ability to make anyone feel seen and valued. To her classmates, she was a role model of determination, working tirelessly toward her dream of becoming a physician assistant. To her family, she was a source of joy and pride, the embodiment of love in its purest form. The closing tribute to Sarah is a reminder that even though her time on Earth was brief, her impact was lasting. The ripple effects of her kindness continue in the people she lifted up, the friends she supported, and the family she cherished. Those memories are not diminished by her death. They are magnified, shining brighter in the face of tragedy. For her community, Sarah's name now carries both sorrow and inspiration. At vigils, when balloons floated into the night sky, each one symbolized not only grief, but also the hope that Sarah's spirit was soaring higher than the pain left behind. The sky filled with color, and in that moment, she was remembered as she lived, vibrant, full of life, and unforgettable. Her family's words echo in the tribute. Sarah was smart, strong, and brave. She had dreams that stretched far beyond her years, dreams stolen far too soon. But in sharing her story, her parents, friends, and community have ensured that Sarah's voice has not been silenced. Instead, it continues to speak through the love and lessons she left behind. The closing tribute also belongs to her peers, students who will carry forward her determination, advocates who will raise awareness about domestic violence, and families who will remember to ask more questions, listen more closely, and act more quickly. Sarah's life becomes a legacy that urges others to live with more compassion and more vigilance. In honoring Sarah, we also confront the hard truth. Her story should never have needed to be told in this way. Yet, because it was, we have a responsibility to carry it forward with respect and purpose. Her death cannot be undone, but her memory can inspire a safer future for others. That is the ultimate tribute, to turn pain into protection and sorrow into strength. As the video fades to a close, the image of Sarah smiling reminds us that she was more than a statistic, more than a victim. She was a daughter, a friend, a dreamer, and though her life ended far too soon, her light has not gone out. It shines in every story shared, every balloon released, and every person who chooses to act in her honor. For those who loved her, the loss is immeasurable. But love, even in the face of tragedy, does not die. It lingers in the memories, the photographs, the laughter replayed in the hearts of family and friends. That love keeps Sarah alive in the ways that matter most. And so, we close not with the sound of tragedy, but with a promise that Sarah Carroll's name will be remembered with love, a promise that her story will spark change, and a promise that her light, though dimmed on earth, will continue to shine forever. Thank you for watching the story of Sarah Carroll. This case is a powerful and sobering reminder of the unseen dangers that can erupt from toxic relationships and private conflicts. If this story resonated with you, and you want to ensure you never miss a deep dive into stories that matter, we ask for your support. Please consider hitting that subscribe button so you can come back and revisit this and other critical stories that need to be remembered. The The more people who know about this case, the more awareness we can create about the dangers of domestic violence and unchecked toxic relationships. If you believe this story can help others, please like and share this video with your friends and family. Your simple click could be the awareness someone needs. The true value of a story like this lies in the conversations it inspires. We invite you to share your thoughts and feelings in the comments section below. What did you take away from this case? Have you seen similar situations unfold? Your comments can become a valuable space for others to learn from your thoughts and experiences, turning a single tragedy into a powerful lesson for our community. Thank you again for your time and for joining us in remembering this important story.